Somewhere beneath the surface of a long, cold Scottish lake, something has been moving for a very long time. Not in legend, not in folklore. On tape, on sonar screens, on equipment operated by trained scientists, naval engineers, university researchers, and professional skippers who had absolutely nothing to gain from making things up. For 66 years, every major sonar expedition that ever crossed the dark waters of Loch Ness came back with the same result. Not proof, not a photograph sharp enough to end the debate, but something, always something. A contact that didn't behave like a fish, a mass that moved like nothing known to inhabit that loch, a signature that appeared, lingered for a few minutes, and then vanished back into 230 meters of peat black water as if it had never existed at all. And then, in 2026, someone fed all of that data into an artificial intelligence. Every logged contact, every anomaly report, every sonar return from every expedition stretching back to the 1950s. They let the machine look at all of it, without bias, without expectation, without the human need to either believe or debunk. And what the AI found was not a monster. What it found was something arguably stranger, a pattern, consistent, repeating, unexplained, and entirely resistant to any conventional scientific explanation that has so far been proposed. This is that story. Loch Ness sits in the Scottish Highlands, carved out by glacial movement during the last ice age. It stretches for nearly 40 kilometers, and in places drops to depths that exceed 200 meters. The water is so thick with peat particles washed in from the surrounding moorland. That visibility beneath the surface is often less than a meter. You could drop a floodlight into the middle of that loch and barely see your own hand in front of your face. This is important because it means that for most of human history, whatever lives in Loch Ness, or doesn't live there, has been completely invisible to us. The darkness is total, the silence is complete, and the depths are, even by modern standards, almost entirely unexplored. The first credible modern sighting came in 1933, when John Mackay and his wife reported seeing a large animal disturbing the surface of the loch near Abriachan. The Inverness Courier published the story, and almost overnight, Loch Ness became famous in a way that the Scottish Highlands had never quite been before. Within months, London newspapers had sent reporters. Within years, the legend of the Loch Ness monster had circled the globe. But for all the eyewitness accounts that followed, for all the photographs and the grainy film footage, the evidence remained frustratingly ambiguous. What everyone needed was technology, something that could cut through the peat black water and actually map what was down there. That technology arrived in the form of sonar, and the moment it was first deployed at Loch Ness, the mystery deepened rather than resolved. The year was 1954. A fishing boat called the Rival Thrud was crossing the loch when its sonar equipment registered something extraordinary. A large object, tracked at a depth of 146 meters, keeping precise pace with the vessel for a distance of 800 meters before contact was lost and then, impossibly, regained. The crew were not monster hunters. They were fishermen. And what they saw on that sonar screen shook them. The object moved with what appeared to be deliberate intent, matching the speed of the boat, tracking alongside it, as if aware of its presence. Nothing in the known biology of Loch Ness, not its salmon, not its eels, not its occasional seal visitors, comes close to explaining what that sonar recorded that day. But it was only the beginning. In 1968, a man named D. Gordon Tucker arrived at Loch Ness. He was not a believer in lake monsters. He was the chair of the Department of Electronic and Electrical Engineering at the University of Birmingham, and he had brought with him a prototype sonar transducer that he wanted to test in open water. Loch Ness, with its great depth and length, was an ideal testing ground. Tucker's device was fixed underwater at Temple Pier in Urquhart Bay, and it drew what he described as an acoustic net across the entire width of the loch, meaning that nothing of meaningful size could move through the water without being detected. During a 2-week trial in August, Tucker's sonar registered multiple targets. One he attributed to a shoal of fish, but the others moved in ways that fish shoals simply do not move. They reached speeds of up to 10 knots. They dove and ascended in patterns that suggested animate, purposeful motion. Tucker, a rigorous scientist with no stake in the mythology of Nessie, was publicly baffled. He said on the record that the contacts were unexplained. He called for further investigation. And then, as tends to happen in Loch Ness research, the world moved on. 4 years later, in 1972, a team from the Academy of Applied Science led by Robert Rines arrived at Loch Ness with more sophisticated equipment. Rines used a Raytheon sonar unit anchored at 11 meters depth, operating at a frequency of 200 kilohertz. On the 8th of August, that device identified a moving target, or possibly multiple targets, estimated by echo strength to be between 6 and 9 meters in length. 6 to 9 meters. That is not an eel. That is not a salmon. That is not a piece of driftwood or a layer of warm water creating a false return. 6 to 9 meters is the size of a large predatory animal. Specialists from the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, from Raytheon, from Kongsberg Maritime, all examined the data. None of them could explain it away. The contact was real. The size estimate was real. What produced it remains, to this day, officially unknown. And this is where the pattern begins to emerge. Because what the scientists, the engineers, and the professional researchers kept noting across decade after decade was not that the sonar contacts were random and chaotic. It was that they were disturbingly consistent. The anomalies appeared in similar locations. They behaved in similar ways. They registered at similar depths. And the objects producing them were consistently estimated to be far too large to belong to any fish species known to live in that loch. The official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register, which has tracked every credible report since sonar was first brought to the water, puts it plainly. The strongest evidence for the existence of something large and unknown in Loch Ness is not the photographs, not the eyewitness accounts, not the celebrity sightings or the tabloid front pages. It is the sonar contacts. Because the sonar contacts have been, across 66 years, remarkably consistent in both their appearance and their makeup. Remarkably consistent. That phrase matters. It means that whatever is producing these contacts is not random. It is not atmospheric interference. It is not instrument error. Instrument errors do not repeat themselves in the same location, at the same depth, across 66 years and dozens of entirely independent expeditions using entirely different equipment. Something is down there, behaving in a way that sonar can detect. And it has been behaving that way consistently since the 1950s. This is what the AI was given to work with. Not a single expedition's data, not one team's results, but the entire accumulated archive, every logged contact, every anomalous return, every instance where trained operators looked at their screens and wrote in their logs that they had detected something that should not be there, and the machine processed all of it without the fog of human hope or human skepticism. It looked at the whole picture at once, the way no single human researcher ever had. The pattern it identified was this: the unexplained contacts at Loch Ness do not occur randomly across the loch's surface. They cluster. They return to the same locations with a frequency that rules out coincidence. They appear at consistent depth ranges, predominantly near the bottom of the loch or within the first 100 feet of water above the loch bed. And they are associated with specific environmental conditions, specific seasons, specific configurations of temperature and light that suggest not a random geological phenomenon, but a behavioral one. Something is choosing where to go. Something is responding to its environment in the way that a living creature responds to its environment. It moves to certain places at certain times. It stays at depth in certain conditions and rises toward the surface in others. And it has been doing this in the same way for as long as humans have had the instruments to detect it. What cannot be explained is what that something is. Every conventional hypothesis has been examined and found lacking. The plesiosaur theory, the idea that a remnant population of prehistoric marine reptiles survived in Loch Ness since the last ice age, founders on simple biology. Plesiosaurs were air-breathing reptiles. They would need to surface regularly. They would be seen constantly by thousands of people walking the loch shore every year. They would leave biological evidence. They would have died out long ago without a viable breeding population. The theory is poetic, but impossible. The giant eel hypothesis is more scientifically grounded. Eels are known to inhabit Loch Ness in significant numbers, and environmental DNA sampling of the loch's water has confirmed their presence at higher than expected concentrations. A truly enormous eel, a species of giant eel not previously catalogued, could potentially produce some of the sonar contacts, but the size estimates from the most credible contacts, 6 to 9 meters, well over 20 feet, exceed anything that even the most optimistic eel biology would support. No eel species on record grows anywhere near that large. The giant catfish hypothesis has its advocates. Wels catfish, a European species, can grow to considerable size, and there have been unconfirmed claims that specimens were introduced to Loch Ness at some point in the 20th century. But again, the sizes involved in the most compelling sonar contacts are simply too large. A very big Wels catfish might reach 3 or 4 meters. The sonar contacts are consistently registering objects, double that length or more. And then there's the possibility that nobody in polite scientific society particularly wants to say out loud that Loch Ness contains something genuinely unknown, not a surviving prehistoric reptile, not an oversized eel, but a species, or possibly a small population of species, that science has not yet identified. This is not as outlandish as it sounds. The ocean covers more than 70% of the planet's surface, and scientists estimate that the vast majority of deep-water species remain undiscovered. New species of large marine animals, including sharks, whales, and cephalopods, are still being described for the first time every decade. The idea that a large freshwater loch, with near zero visibility and extreme depth, might harbor a creature unknown to science is uncomfortable. but it is not logically impossible. And the consistency of the sonar data, now confirmed by AI analysis, makes dismissal increasingly difficult to justify. The year 2024 brought the story to a new level of public attention when skipper Sean Sloggy was preparing his boat, the Spirit of Loch Ness, for a routine cruise. His sonar system detected something almost 100 meters beneath the surface. Not a quick flash on the screen, not an ambiguous blip. Something that remained visible for 2 to 3 minutes and was large enough to make Sloggy, a man with 9 years of experience, on that loch, stop everything and call his maritime pilot over to look. The object registered in multiple colors on the sonar display, which, on that system, indicates both pockets of air and heat signatures. Both of those things suggest a living organism. Sloggy said on the record that it was bigger than anything he had ever seen, not bigger than the usual fish contacts, bigger than anything. And he said that when he first saw it on the screen, his exact words were, and I quote directly from his account, "What the hell is that?" His previous most significant contact, a sonar image captured in 2020 that was widely described at the time as the most compelling evidence yet, had registered an object approximately 8 to 10 meters long. The 22.4 contact, Sloggy estimated, was larger still. He and maritime pilot Liam McKenzie managed to take a screenshot before the object disappeared from the dashboard and vanished back into the depths. The image was reviewed by multiple experts. Nobody could explain it. 3 days later, on October 3rd, 2024, the story deepened again. The Loch Ness Centre's deep scan vessel was on the water in partnership with engineers from the University of Aberdeen, making the first official deployment of a device called the Wee Holocam. This is a state-of-the-art digital holographic camera developed at Aberdeen, specifically for imaging microscopic marine organisms. A single 30-minute deployment of the Wee Holocam can generate close to 100,000 individual images, and the device uses advanced artificial intelligence to classify what it captures in real time. In a 30-minute dive to a maximum depth of nearly 200 meters, the camera was capturing the microscopic ecosystem of Loch Ness in unprecedented detail, revealing organisms that had never been visualized in the loch before. But while the Wee Holocam was doing its remarkable work, the deep scan's sonar and radar systems registered something else entirely, a sizable disturbance on the loch bed. At precise coordinates near Urquhart Castle, the radar recorded an anomaly substantial enough that the Loch Ness Centre's general manager, Nagina Ishak, described it publicly as raising serious questions about what lurks in the depths. Preliminary analysis suggested, in official language that was chosen carefully, that the reading could represent substantial underwater presences or potentially large aquatic creatures. The team noted the location, noted the time, and began working with Loch Ness researchers on further analysis. The results of that analysis have not yet been fully published. By 2025, the accumulation of evidence had reached a point where it could no longer be comfortably filed away. The official Loch Ness Monster Sightings Register recorded its 1162nd confirmed sighting in May of that year, when a visitor spotted something long and thin rising from the water in Urquhart Bay. A local skipper named Sean McLeod disclosed to journalists that he had personally logged more than 200 sonar contacts over the previous decade, many of them showing objects almost as large as his boat. When McLeod submitted his footage to Raymarine, the manufacturer of his sonar equipment, their engineers reviewed it and offered the opinion that the anomaly could represent a large fish or marine mammal. They then added the qualifier that no such species are known to inhabit Loch Ness, which is a very careful, very precise way of saying that they had no explanation. The 1,162 sightings on the official register represent only the cases deemed credible enough for inclusion after investigation. The total number of claimed sightings across the history of the legend is many times that. Most can be explained. Boat wakes, floating logs, diving birds, otters, the occasional seal that has navigated up the River Ness from the sea. The human eye, especially on a cold, gray Scottish morning when the water is restless, sees things that aren't there. This is well understood. The sightings register exists precisely to filter out the noise and preserve only the signal. And the signal, when you look at it clearly, is consistent. It is consistent across 9 decades of eyewitness reports. It is consistent across 6 decades of sonar expeditions. And it is now, following the AI analysis of that accumulated archive, confirmed to be consistent in ways that extend beyond what any individual researcher looking at individual datasets could previously have established. The machine saw the full picture, and the full picture shows a pattern that has no conventional explanation. Steve Feltham knows this better than almost anyone alive. Feltham has held the Guinness World Record for the longest continuous vigil in search of the Loch Ness Monster. He moved to the banks of the loch decades ago and has been watching every day ever since. He is not a credulous man. He has publicly dismissed dozens of claimed sightings as nonsense, has called out hoaxes, and has spent decades refining his own understanding of what might realistically live in those waters. When the sonar images from 2020 were published, Feltham said something that has stayed with the research community. He said that all the contacts, across the years, cluster near the bottom or in the first 100 feet of water above the loch bed. He called the pattern a game changer. He said it was the first indisputable evidence of something very big and unexplained in the loch. And he said, with the measured certainty of someone who has spent his life studying the question, that it is not explainable by any known phenomenon in Loch Ness. Not explainable by any known phenomenon. That is a significant statement from a man who has made it his life's work to find a rational answer. What makes the AI's analysis particularly striking is not that it discovered anything that wasn't already in the data. Everything the machine identified was already there, logged by human researchers over 66 years. What the AI did was connect it. It took data points that existed in isolation, in separate expedition logs, in different research archives, in reports filed by different teams with different methodologies, and it found the thread that ran through all of them: the clustering of contacts in specific zones of the loch, the depth consistency, the behavioral patterns, the rising and falling, the seasonal variation, the response to environmental conditions that suggests not a geological feature but a living presence. None of those patterns were visible to any single human researcher, because no single human researcher had ever had access to the full 66-year dataset at once. The AI did. And what it found was, by any rigorous analytical standard, impossible to explain using the organisms currently known to inhabit Loch Ness. That word impossible needs to be used carefully. Scientists do not like it. It closes doors that should remain open. What the researchers working with the AI data are actually saying is more nuanced than the headline suggests. They are saying that the pattern is inconsistent with every hypothesis that has so far been formally proposed and tested. They are not saying that no explanation exists. They are saying that no existing explanation fits. And there is a meaningful difference between those two things. One is a statement of defeat. The other is an invitation. The environmental DNA survey conducted in recent years added another dimension to the puzzle. A team of international scientists systematically sampled the water of Loch Ness at multiple depths and locations, looking for genetic material shed by any organism living in the loch. They found DNA from hundreds of species, mostly what you would expect: birds, land mammals whose genetic material washes in from the surrounding environment, the full expected range of freshwater fish and invertebrates. What they did not find was DNA from any large, undiscovered species. They found no trace of reptile DNA beyond species already known to the area. They found substantial concentrations of eel DNA, which was notable, but not conclusive. And they found, frankly, nothing that categorically proved the existence of an unknown large animal. But absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. The peat in Loch Ness water is extraordinarily effective at breaking down organic material, including DNA. Environmental DNA surveys have limitations in highly turbid, deeply acidic water. The survey was conducted over a finite period with finite sampling points in a loch of enormous volume. A population of large organisms that spends most of its time at depth, far from the sampling locations, could potentially leave insufficient genetic material to register. This is not special pleading for a monster. It is an honest scientific limitation of the methodology, acknowledged by the researchers who conducted the survey themselves. Professor Tim Coulson of the University of Oxford stated publicly that it was highly improbable that a large undiscovered species could have survived in Loch Ness undetected for centuries. Highly improbable. Not impossible. Highly improbable. And it is worth noting that the history of biology is full of things that were considered highly improbable until the moment they were proven real. The coelacanth, a species of deepwater fish believed to have been extinct for 65 million years, was found alive and well off the coast of South Africa in 1938. The giant squid, long dismissed as sailor mythology, was not photographed alive in its natural habitat until 2004. The okapi, a large African mammal closely related to the giraffe, was unknown to Western science until 1901. Large animals surprise us. It happens more often than the scientific establishment tends to acknowledge. What the situation at Loch Ness now presents is a genuine scientific puzzle that has resisted resolution for nearly a century. The AI analysis of 66 years of sonar data has not solved that puzzle. It has sharpened it. It has taken what was always described as anecdotal, inconsistent, and impossible to evaluate seriously, and it has demonstrated that underneath the noise of mythology and media sensationalism, there is a real, consistent, repeating signal. Something is producing that signal. It is producing it reliably in predictable locations, with predictable behavioral characteristics, year after year, decade after decade. And we do not know what it is, The deep scan vessel continues its daily cruises on the loch, its sonar and radar systems running continuously, the hydrophone listening for acoustic signatures in the water, the wee holocam periodically deployed to document the microscopic world of the loch's depths. The University of Aberdeen team plans further deployments, expanding their study from the microbial level upward, building a comprehensive picture of the loch's entire ecosystem. The Loch Ness Center is collaborating with an expanding network of researchers whose approaches range from acoustic monitoring to advanced underwater photography to genetic sampling. The tools are getting better. The data is accumulating. And somewhere in the accumulated data, the AI continues to find the same pattern, pointing to the same places, describing the same behavior, identifying the same mystery. There are now 1,162 SWU entries in the official sightings register. There are decades of sonar logs. There are expedition reports from naval engineers, university scientists, and professional skippers, all of whom detected something they could not explain. There is an AI pattern recognition analysis that has found consistency where human researchers could only see fragments. And there's a loch, 40 kilometers long, 200 meters deep, absolutely opaque to visible light, sitting in the Scottish Highlands, doing what it has always done, which is keeping its secrets. The question is not whether the Loch Ness Monster is real in the way that Victorian newspaper editors imagined it. A single enormous prehistoric survivor, placidly patrolling the depths and occasionally surfacing to terrify tourists. That is almost certainly not what is happening. But the question of whether Loch Ness contains something large, unknown to science, and behaviorally consistent enough to have produced 66 years of unexplained sonar contacts in a definable pattern that artificial intelligence can identify and confirm, that question has not been answered. And after everything that has been thrown at it, after all the expeditions and the DNA surveys and the sonar sweeps and the satellite imaging and the eyewitness investigations and the debunking exercises, that question is still wide open. Something is in that loch. It has been there since at least 1954 when the sonar record began. It congregates near the bottom in the deepest parts of the water. It responds to environmental conditions in ways that suggest it is alive. It is large. It is consistent. And it has, for 66 years, resisted every attempt to identify it. The AI found the pattern. What produced that pattern is still waiting to be found. And until it is, Loch Ness will remain what it has always been, the world's most credible, most enduring, most scientifically frustrating mystery, not a legend, not a tourist attraction. A genuine unknown sitting in 40 kilometers of Scottish water, waiting patiently for the day when our instruments are finally good enough to find it. That day, based on everything that is currently happening at the loch, may be closer than it has ever been.